The chamber of the Galactic Council hung in orbit above a dying blue star, its fading light casting long, fractured shadows through walls of transparent crystal. Entire civilizations had been judged here, entire species erased with a single vote. Today it was humanity's turn. Ambassador Elias Varen stood alone at the center platform, a solitary human figure surrounded by towering alien forms that seemed pulled from nightmares and myths alike. Some shimmered like living energy. Others were encased in exoskeletal armor, their true bodies hidden beneath ancient technology. A few didn't appear solid at all, just distortions in space that pulsed with intelligence. Every one of them watched him. Elias adjusted his posture, not out of fear but out of habit, back straight, shoulders steady, voice ready. He had trained for this moment his entire life. But nothing could truly prepare someone to stand in front of beings who had shaped the fate of the galaxy for millions of years. "State your designation," a voice echoed, not spoken but forced directly into his mind. "I am Elias Varen," he replied clearly, refusing to let the pressure bend his tone. "Ambassador of Earth, representative of humanity." A ripple passed through the chamber, not approval. "Amusement." "You are fragile," another voice whispered, layered and distorted. "Organic, short-lived, divided." Elias allowed himself a small breath. "Yes," he said, "we are all of those things." That wasn't the answer they expected. The High Arbiter shifted forward, its form coalescing into something almost visible, a towering silhouette of burning crystal and void. When it spoke, the chamber itself seemed to vibrate. "Your species' history has been reviewed. War, genocide, self-destruction. You are not unique. You are predictable." Elias met its gaze. "We're also evolving," he said. Silence followed. Heavy, pressurized, dangerous. "Explain." Elias stepped forward slightly, boots echoing softly against the luminous floor. "Humanity has made mistakes," he admitted. "Terrible ones. We've fought each other, hurt each other, nearly destroyed ourselves more than once." Murmurs spread again, sharper now. "But we learned," he continued, his voice gaining strength. "We built systems to prevent it. We chose cooperation over extinction. We reached for the stars not to conquer, but to connect." A pause. "We came here because we believe intelligence doesn't have to lead to domination. It can lead to understanding." For a moment, just a moment, there was stillness. Then a sound erupted across the chamber. Laughter. Not human laughter, not warm, not amused. "Cruel. You speak of ideals," one delegate hissed, its form twisting like liquid shadow. "We speak of reality." "You are young," another added. "You still believe morality is strength." Elias didn't flinch. "It is," he said. That single sentence cut through the noise. The High Arbiter leaned closer. "No," it replied. "Morality is a luxury afforded by the powerful." Elias shook his head slowly. "No," he repeated. "It's what stops power from becoming destruction." That was the moment everything shifted. The chamber dimmed. Lights faded. Energy fields ignited along the perimeter, sealing the space. Elias felt it immediately. The change in atmosphere, the tightening grip of something irreversible. The Arbiter's voice dropped, colder now. "You dare lecture the Council on power." Elias exhaled once. "Steady. I'm asking you not to repeat the mistakes we already survived." A long silence followed. Then, "Judgment has been reached." The words struck like a physical force. Elias didn't move. "Humanity represents an unstable variable within galactic equilibrium," the Arbiter declared. "Projected threat probability exceeds acceptable limits." Elias' jaw tightened. "You're making a mistake." "No," the Arbiter replied. "We are preventing one." The floor beneath him flickered. Energy built rapidly, far beyond anything human technology could replicate. Elias felt the heat before he saw it. "Oh," he whispered, realization hitting all at once. There would be no negotiation. No second chance. No return home. The first wave of plasma ignited beneath his feet. Pain exploded through his body, white-hot and overwhelming. His knees buckled, but he forced himself upright, teeth clenched, breath shattered. The chamber watched, silent, observing. Ilias' vision blurred, but his hand moved, instinct training, purpose guiding him. Hidden beneath his sleeve, a microtransmitter activated. It wasn't powerful. It wasn't meant to be. Just enough to send one message. One truth. His voice trembled, but he spoke anyway. We came in peace. The signal burst outward, slipping past the council systems in a narrow, desperate beam. The plasma surged higher. Skin burned, nerves screamed. The world collapsed into fire. Still, Ilias lifted his head. Not in defiance. In resolve. The last thing he saw wasn't the council. It was Earth. In his mind. Blue, fragile, worth everything. And then, Ambassador Ilias Varen was gone. Reduced to ash. Erased before the galaxy. But his message survived. And far across the void. Humanity was already listening. The message didn't arrive clean. It never does. Across Earth's orbital relay network, the signal appeared as nothing more than a faint disturbance, an anomaly buried in cosmic background noise. Automated systems flagged it, categorized it, nearly discarded it. Nearly. A junior analyst at a deep space monitoring station hesitated. Something about the pattern felt intentional. He isolated it, amplified it, and then he heard a voice. Broken, distorted, burning through static like it was fighting to exist. We came in peace. The room went still. Run it again, someone whispered. They did. This time the system reconstructed the signal further. The visual feed came next, fragmented frames stitched together by desperate algorithms. A man, on his knees, surrounded by light so intense it looked like a star had collapsed around him. Ambassador Ilias Varen. Alive. Burning. The room erupted into motion. Confirm source. Triangulating. Is this real? Coordinates flooded the display. Not a pirate relay, not corrupted data. The Galactic Council chamber. Silence swallowed the chaos. Because everyone in that room understood exactly what they were looking at. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was an execution. Within minutes, the signal was transmitted to every major government on Earth. Within 10 minutes, it reached military command structures. Within 30, it leaked. Not entirely, not officially. But enough. Enough for the world to see. Cities slowed, screens filled. Conversations died mid-sentence as billions of people watched the same horrifying footage. Ilias standing alone. Ilias speaking. Ilias burning. He didn't scream at first. That detail spread faster than the video itself. He stood. Even as the fire consumed him, he stood. And when the scream finally came, it wasn't fear. It was pain endured. People felt it. Not just saw it. Felt it. Across continents, something shifted. This wasn't politics. This wasn't distant war. This was personal. Humanity had sent one man to represent them all, and he died refusing to kneel. In New York, crowds gathered in stunned silence. In Tokyo, trains stopped as passengers stared at frozen screens. In Lagos, in Berlin, in Sao Paulo, people stepped out into the streets without even realizing why. They just needed to be near others. Because something had been taken from all of them. In a secure command facility buried beneath Arctic ice, the United Earth Defense Command convened under emergency protocol. No media. No delay. No debate. A circular room filled with the most powerful individuals on the planet. Military leaders, heads of state, strategic advisors. At the center of the table, a single image hovered. Ilias Varen. Frozen mid-frame. Burning. No one spoke at first. Finally, a general broke the silence. They killed him. Not he died. Not we lost him. Killed. Deliberate clear. A woman across the table leaned forward, her voice tight. They didn't just kill him, they made sure we saw it. That landed harder than anything else. Because she was right. This wasn't just execution. It was a message. Another officer exhaled slowly. So what's ours? The question hung in the air. Heavy. Dangerous. Because everyone in that room knew. Once answered, there would be no going back. A file appeared on the table. Black. Unmarked. Restricted beyond all standard clearance levels. One word displayed across its surface. Last light. Several leaders shifted uncomfortably. That program was never meant to be activated, someone said quietly. No, another replied. It was meant to exist in case we had no choice. Silence again. Then the video replayed. Elia's final moment. We came in peace. The room didn't react outwardly. But internally, something hardened. The decision wasn't made through speeches. No long arguments. No hesitation. One by one, confirmations appeared. Authorization codes. Biometric locks disengaged. Final safeguards lifted. Unanimous. A single command was issued. Activate all dormant assets. Across Earth and far beyond it, systems long buried beneath secrecy awakened. Deep under oceans, massive structures powered on for the first time in decades. Hidden installations beneath mountains unlocked. Silent satellites shifted from passive observation to active readiness. And in the outer darkness of the solar system, past Pluto, past the last mapped boundary of human civilization, something enormous stirred. A structure so vast it had been mistaken for debris by any who might have glimpsed it. Its surface lit up slowly, layer by layer, like a sleeping giant opening its eyes. Ancient protocols reactivated. Targeting systems initialized. A voice, cold, artificial, unmistakably human, echoed through its core systems. Command authority confirmed. Back on Earth, no one celebrated. No one cheered. Because this wasn't victory. This was consequence. The same general who had spoken earlier looked around the room one last time. This is it, he said quietly. Once we proceed, there's no returning to who we were. No one argued. No one objected. Because far above them, beyond their sky, a man had burned alive for believing in peace. And now, humanity was about to answer. The Galactic Council believed it understood humanity. That belief was its first mistake. For decades, human broadcasts had spilled into the void, raw, unfiltered, chaotic. Wars, politics, division, endless arguments over borders, beliefs, resources. To the ancient species of the Council, it looked familiar. Predictable. Another young civilization struggling with itself, destined either to mature slowly or destroy itself before it ever truly mattered. They catalogued humanity the way they had catalogued countless others. Unstable, emotional, primitive. They never asked the more important question. What was humanity not showing? Because while the world argued loudly on its surface, something else had been happening quietly beneath it. Humanity had been learning. Every signal they intercepted, every trace of alien technology recovered from deep space anomalies, every faint indication that they were not alone. They studied it all. And more importantly, they studied what happened to species that were discovered too early. Extinction, absorption, erasure. The universe, they realized, didn't reward potential. It eliminated risk. So humanity made a choice long before the Council ever noticed them. They would not appear dangerous, but they would be ready. Deep within classified facilities scattered across Earth and its off-world colonies, projects took shape that never appeared in any official record. Engineers worked on theories considered impossible by conventional science. Physicists bent rules they had once sworn were absolute. Entire fleets were constructed in silence. Ships that emitted no signatures. Weapons that didn't rely on energy, but on reality itself. Not for conquest. Never for conquest. Every project shared a single purpose. Survival at any cost. It wasn't fear that drove them. It was memory. Humanity remembered what it had once been to itself. And it refused to be that vulnerable again. Back in the council chamber, none of this was known. To them, the execution of Ilias Varan was routine. Necessary. Efficient. The High Arbiter didn't feel satisfaction. It didn't feel doubt either. Only certainty. Begin extermination protocol, it commanded. Across nearby systems, Council fleets shifted into formation. Massive warships, each capable of glassing entire planets, aligned toward the Sol system. Orders propagated instantly. Coordinates locked. Weapons primed. This would be quick. Decisive. Another potential threat removed before it could evolve into something problematic. A junior tactical overseer monitored the process, its multi-layered perception scanning across dimensions of data. Everything was normal. Until it was. A flicker. Barely noticeable. Then another. Sensor anomaly detected, it reported. The Arbiter didn't turn. Clarify. Unidentified spatial distortions, the Overseer replied. Multiple points. How many? A pause. Then, increasing. Across the chamber, several delegates shifted their attention toward the central display. The distortions sharpened, collapsed inward, and then ships appeared, not arriving, not emerging, appearing, as if they had always been there, just unseen. 1, 10, 100, more. The display struggled to keep up as the number climbed rapidly. Impossible, one delegate whispered, its form flickering in agitation. There are no recorded transit signatures. No warp fields, another added. No slipstream residue, nothing. The Arbiter turned now. Slowly, deliberately. Identify them. The Overseer hesitated, a rare occurrence. Then it answered. Energy profiles match human origin. Silence spread through the chamber. Not the calm silence from before. This one carried weight. Confusion. Disruption. The number of ships stabilized. Thousands. Perfectly positioned. Encircling. Not just the chamber, but the entire defensive perimeter of the Council's local sector. Every strategic point covered. Every escape vector blocked. They've surrounded us, the Overseer said, its voice faltering. That is not possible, another delegate snapped. They do not possess the capability. A transmission cut through the chamber. Clean, direct, unfiltered. No attempt to hide it. No encryption. Just a voice. Human. Calm. You executed our diplomat. The words landed harder than any weapon. No anger. No shouting. Just certainty. The Arbiter stepped forward slightly, its presence intensifying. This is a restricted domain, it responded. Withdraw immediately or... You misunderstand, the human voice interrupted. A pause. Then, you don't have authority here anymore. Across every display, targeting systems lit up. Thousands of human ships, each locking onto critical Council assets simultaneously. Weapon signatures registered, unfamiliar, unreadable. Wrong. Completely wrong. What are those systems? A strategist demanded. No one had an answer. Because they didn't behave like weapons. They didn't build energy. They didn't charge. They simply existed. Ready. Waiting. The human voice returned, quieter now. You mistook restraint for weakness. A subtle shift occurred across the fleet. Not movement. Intent. And in that moment, for the first time in its existence, the Galactic Council felt something it had long since forgotten. Uncertainty. Because the species they had just condemned as primitive. was now aiming something at them they couldn't understand, and had clearly been prepared to use. The first shot came from the Council. It always did. The Arbiter didn't hesitate. It didn't negotiate. Not yet. Control had been challenged, and in the history of the Council, there had only ever been one acceptable response to that. Fire. The command rippled outward instantly. Council warships, ancient, massive, refined through millions of years of conflict, unleashed their weapons in perfect synchronization. Beams of compressed stellar energy lanced across the void, tearing through space itself as they converged on the human fleet. The light was blinding. For a moment, the stars disappeared behind it. Impact followed. Direct hits. Thousands of them. The kind of firepower that had reduced entire civilizations to dust within seconds. The chamber's observation arrays flared, struggling to compensate for the overwhelming radiation. Then, darkness. The beams faded. Residual energy scattered into silence. Every sensor in the system focused forward. Waiting. Expecting debris. Wreckage. Anything. Instead, the human fleet was still there. Exactly where it had been. Unmoved. Untouched. A wave of confusion swept through the chamber. "That's not possible," a tactical analyst said sharply. "Those shields, there's no energy displacement, no absorption curve." "They didn't block it," another whispered. The Arbiter narrowed its focus. "Then what did they do?" No one answered. Because there was no known explanation. The human ships hadn't resisted the attack in any measurable way. They had simply endured it, as if the assault had never happened. On the central display, one of the human vessels shifted slightly. Not retreating, not advancing aggressively, just aligning. A small change, but deliberate. Then it fired. There was no visible beam, no flare of energy, no charge-up sequence. Just a pulse, a distortion that flickered across space like a ripple passing through glass. It touched a Council battleship, and the ship vanished. No explosion, no fragmentation, no residual radiation. One moment it existed. The next, nothing. The silence that followed was absolute. "What happened?" a delegate whispered, its voice trembling in a way no one had ever heard before. "Replay," the Arbiter commanded. The system complied instantly. Frame by frame. Analysis across every spectrum. The result didn't change. The ship had not been destroyed. It had not been displaced. It had not been converted into energy. It had simply ceased. A low murmur spread across the chamber, this time not of arrogance or dismissal, but fear. Another human ship adjusted its position. Another pulse. Another Council vessel disappeared. Gone. Without resistance. Without warning. Panic erupted. All units evasive maneuvers. Deploy countermeasures. Lock defensive grids now. Commands flooded across the network, but something was wrong. The human weapons didn't behave like anything the Council had encountered. There was no trajectory to evade. No signal to intercept. No energy buildup to counter. By the time a target was identified, it was already gone. "They're rewriting matter," one strategist said, voice cracking. "No worse, they're removing it from existence entirely." The Arbiter remained still, but its internal processes surged. This was beyond technological superiority. This was a paradigm shift. Another volley from the Council erupted, more chaotic now, less controlled. Desperation creeping into precision. The human fleet held position. No panic. No disorder. Just observation. And then, response. This time, multiple pulses. Not random. Not excessive. Each one selected with surgical intent. Command ships. Weapon platforms. Strategic assets. Gone, gone, gone. The Council's formation began to collapse, not from destruction, but from disintegration of structure. They're targeting our hierarchy, the Overseer reported, disabling coordination. They're dismantling us, another added. Not defeating. Dismantling. The distinction mattered, because it meant something far worse. This wasn't retaliation. It was control. On one of the primary human vessels, a figure stood at the command interface, watching the battlefield with steady focus. No satisfaction. No hesitation. Continue targeting military assets only, she ordered calmly. Civilian zones remain untouched. A subordinate hesitated. Ma'am, we can end this faster. I know, she replied. A pause. But we won't. Back in the council chamber, the Arbiter finally spoke again. Open a communication channel. Its voice carried something new. Not fear, not submission, but something dangerously close to realization. Because for the first time since the council's formation, it was no longer certain of the outcome. The channel initialized. Human frequencies locked instantly. The transmission opened. And for the first time, the Galactic Council wasn't issuing judgment. It was about to listen, because the species they had just tried to erase had answered, and they hadn't even begun to show everything they could do. The channel opened without delay. No encryption barriers, no layered defenses. The humans didn't hide the signal, they allowed it. That alone unsettled the Council. On the central display, the image resolved into a human command deck, clean, controlled, almost minimal. No chaos, no urgency, just quiet efficiency. At its center stood a woman in a dark uniform. No insignia of rank. No visible authority. Yet everything about her posture made it clear. She was in command. Identify yourself, the Arbiter demanded, its voice resonating across frequencies. The woman didn't answer immediately. She simply looked at it, studied it, as if measuring something far beyond the moment. Finally, she spoke. You burned him alive. The words landed harder than any weapon strike. No accusation. No raised voice. Just fact. The Arbiter's crystalline form shifted subtly. The individual you refer to was judged according to established. He had a name, she interrupted. A pause. Elias Varan. Silence. Even among the council, the name now carried weight. Because they had all seen how he died. He represented a species classified as a potential threat, the Arbiter continued, attempting to regain control of the exchange. His termination was a preventative measure. The woman's expression didn't change. You didn't just kill him, she said. You made it a spectacle. No response came. Because there wasn't one. He was unarmed, she continued. He stood alone in your chamber and offered you peace. Her voice tightened, not with rage but with restraint. And you answered with fire. The Arbiter recalibrated its tone. This level of retaliation is disproportionate. You risk destabilizing. To you, the woman said quietly, he was one human. She stepped closer to the display. To us, he was all of us. The chamber went still. Not because of the words themselves, but because of the certainty behind them. You don't understand our species, she continued. We fight each other, we argue, we divide ourselves in ways you probably find inefficient. A faint, almost humorless breath. But when something threatens us from the outside. Her gaze hardened. We stopped being separate. Across the battlefield, human ships began to shift. Not aggressively, not erratically, but with purpose. Formations restructured. Vectors recalculated. And slowly, their targeting systems changed. No longer focused solely on council fleets. Now, they extended outward, toward planets, core systems, centers of governance. A ripple of alarm surged through the chamber. They're locking onto population centers. Civilian zones identified. The Arbiter's voice sharpened instantly. Cease targeting non-military assets. The woman tilted her head slightly. Are you concerned about collateral damage now? No answer came, because the implication was unavoidable. You asked if this response was excessive, she said. A pause. Then, we haven't even escalated yet. The words chilled the chamber. Because they were true. Despite everything, the destroyed fleets, the erased ships, humanity had still shown restraint. Stand down your forces, the Arbiter ordered, its authority returning in force. This conflict can still be resolved through. You already made your decision, the woman replied. You judged us. You sentenced us. And then you expected us to accept it. Her eyes didn't waver. That was your mistake. Behind her, a secondary display lit up. Rows of data. Expanding. Growing. Additional fleets. Hidden ones. Activating across distant systems. The scale of it began to emerge. This wasn't the full force of humanity. Not even close. A strategist within the council whispered, barely audible. How many ships do they have? No one answered. Because the number was still rising. The Arbiter focused on the woman again. You would risk galactic war over a single life. This time, she didn't pause. We would end galaxies for less. No emotion. No hesitation. Just truth. And in that moment, something broke within the Council's perception of humanity. They had expected anger. They had expected chaos. What they were facing instead was conviction. Absolute. Unyielding. The woman straightened slightly. All units, she said calmly. Across every human ship, weapons systems adjusted simultaneously. Not random. Not wide-scale. Precise. Calculated. Final. Prepare Phase 2. A subordinate voice responded instantly. Targets confirmed. The Arbiter surged forward. If you proceed. We will, she said. No room for argument. No space for negotiation. The decision had already been made. She held the Arbiter's gaze for one final second. Then gave the order. Execute. And across the stars, humanity moved from response to something far more terrifying. It didn't begin with explosions. It began with silence. Across multiple star systems, far beyond the immediate reach of the Council chamber, human ships appeared, without transit signatures, without warning, without even a measurable distortion of space. One moment, nothing. The next, presence. They didn't announce themselves. They didn't broadcast threats. They simply acted. In the Vyerk system, a Council shipyard orbiting a gas giant went dark. No alarms. No defensive fire. Just a sudden absence of power, followed by a controlled collapse of its structural lattice. Docked warships disintegrated in sequence, not violently, but precisely, as if each molecule had been instructed to let go at the same time. Thousands of vessels, gone in under 30 seconds. No debris field. No survivors. But also, no collateral damage. The surrounding civilian habitats remained untouched, their inhabitants watching in frozen disbelief as their military shield vanished without a single stray impact. In another system, a planetary defense grid activated the moment human signatures appeared. Massive orbital cannons rotated into position, firing streams of concentrated energy that could crack continents. The human ships didn't evade. They didn't block. They simply phased, brief distortions flickering across their hulls as the attacks passed through empty space that shouldn't have been empty. Then came the response. Not to the planet. Never to the planet. Only to the weapons. Each cannon, each targeting array, each command relay, disabled in perfect order. Not destroyed. Neutralized. reduced to inert metal hanging silently in orbit. A council commander, watching from a distant system, felt something cold settle deep within its core processing. "They're choosing what to erase," it whispered. "Everything else they leave." Back in the council chamber, reports flooded in faster than they could be processed. Sector 12, military infrastructure gone. Outer defense rings non-functional. Command relays across 3 systems have ceased responding. The Arbiter stood motionless at the center, absorbing the data. Patterns began to emerge. Too consistent. Too precise. "They are not spreading damage randomly," it said slowly. "They are following a structure." A strategist pulled up a projection. Human strikes mapped across multiple regions of controlled space. At first glance, it looked chaotic. Then, the lines connected. Supply chains severed. Communication hubs eliminated. Fleet coordination nodes erased. "They're dismantling our network," the strategist said, voice tightening. "Not attacking it, removing its ability to function." Another voice cut in. "This was planned." Silence followed, because that realization changed everything. This wasn't retaliation born from anger. This was execution of a pre-existing strategy. "They knew exactly where to strike," someone said, "before this even began." The Arbiter turned toward the main display again. Human ships continued their movements, appearing and disappearing across systems with impossible efficiency. There was no hesitation, no wasted motion, no confusion. Every action flowed into the next like a sequence that had already been calculated down to the smallest detail. "They're not reacting to us," the Arbiter said. "They're ahead of us." As if to confirm it, another report arrived. Council reinforcement fleet, ambushed before reaching staging point. "How?" a delegate demanded. "They had no way of knowing our route." "They didn't," the overseer replied. A pause. "Or they predicted it." The chamber grew colder. Because if that was true, then every decision they made was already accounted for. Every move anticipated. Every counter meaningless. Across the galaxy, species that had once feared the Council now watched something unprecedented unfold. Not a war of destruction, but a demonstration of control, so absolute it redefined the concept of power. Humanity wasn't shouting. It wasn't raging. It wasn't even trying to dominate. It was simply removing obstacles. Back in the chamber, a new transmission request appeared. Origin Human Command. The Arbiter hesitated for the briefest moment. Then, "Open it." The same woman appeared again, her expression unchanged. Calm, focused, unmoved by the scale of what was happening. "You are dismantling Council operations across multiple systems," the Arbiter said. "You have proven your capability." A pause. "This can end." The woman looked at it, not with hostility, but with clarity. "This could have ended before it began," she replied. The words settled heavily between them. "You had a choice," she continued. "You made it." Behind her, another display activated. More fleets. More systems. More targets. All aligning. All ready. "This is still restraint," she said quietly. The Arbiter's internal systems surged. "If this is restraint," it asked, "then what does escalation look like?" For the first time, the woman paused, not out of uncertainty, but consideration. Then she answered, "You don't want to find out." The transmission ended, and in the silence that followed, the Council finally understood something terrifying. Everything they had witnessed so far was humanity holding back. The Council had faced extinction-level threats before. Rogue civilizations, unstable artificial intelligences, even natural cosmic phenomena capable of wiping out entire sectors. They had always responded the same way. With control, with certainty, with dominance. This time, none of those applied. The chamber that once echoed with authority now pulsed with overlapping voices, urgent and fractured. We must initiate full surrender protocols. They will not accept it, we've gone too far. Then we escalate, deploy everything we have. Everything we have is already failing. The arguments collided, rising in intensity, each faction pulling toward a different outcome. Unity, the foundation of the Council's power, was breaking. The Arbiter stood at the center, silent. Observing. Calculating. Because beneath the chaos, one truth had become undeniable. They were losing. Not in the traditional sense. Not through overwhelming destruction. But through systematic dismantling. Every attempt to regroup failed. Every reinforcement intercepted. Every countermeasure rendered obsolete before it could even be implemented. It was like trying to fight something that already knew the result. They're not just reacting to our strategies, one analyst said, its voice strained. They're predicting them. Then change the strategy, another snapped. We have, the analyst replied. A pause. They predicted that too. Silence followed. Heavy, suffocating, because it meant something no one in the chamber was prepared to accept. There was no move left that would surprise the humans. The Arbiter finally spoke. All tactical divisions, disengage. The command cut through the noise instantly. Several delegates turned sharply. Disengage, one demanded. You would surrender. This is not surrender, the Arbiter interrupted. A lie. And everyone knew it. But no one challenged it directly. Because the alternative had just appeared on every display. A new alert. Deep within the Council's restricted archives. Access level absolute. Authorization arbiter. A system long sealed, untouched for eons, began to awaken. Ancient code, older than many of the species present, flickered to life. What is that? A delegate asked, its tone shifting from anger to unease. The Arbiter didn't respond immediately. When it did, its voice carried something new. Wait. A final contingency. The chamber grew still. You said such measures were forbidden, another voice said quietly. They are, the Arbiter replied. A pause. But so is extinction. On the central display, a structure appeared. Massive, hidden within a dying star system far beyond standard Council territories. A weapon, not built for battle, built for annihilation. A star killer, designed to trigger a controlled stellar collapse, sending a chain reaction through nearby systems, erasing everything in its path. Not precise, not controlled, absolute. If we cannot stop them, the Arbiter said slowly, we ensure they cannot continue. Shock rippled through the chamber. That will destroy multiple inhabited systems. Yes, billions of lives. Better billions, the Arbiter cut in, than all. Silence followed, because no one could argue with the logic. Not anymore. The command sequence initiated. Energy began to build within the distant structure, pulling matter inward, compressing it beyond safe thresholds. Even from across systems, the distortion was visible. A star trembling on the edge of collapse. Back in human-controlled space, sensors reacted instantly. Alert signals spread across the fleet. On the command deck, the woman turned sharply toward her tactical officer. Source. Unknown weapon activation, massive energy spike, the officer replied. Scale suggests stellar destabilization. Her eyes narrowed. They're going for total burn. A pause. Then, locate it. Coordinates resolved in seconds. Remote. Hidden. But not hidden enough. Prepare interception. Distance is too great. We won't reach it in time if... We're not traveling, she interrupted. We're arriving. The ship shifted. Not moving through space, but folding it. Reality bent for the briefest moment. And then, they were there. No warning. No approach. The human vessel appeared directly beside the Star Killer. Inside the council chamber, alarms surged. They've reached it. How? That system is outside. It doesn't matter, another voice snapped. They're there. The Arbiter focused on the feed, its internal processes racing. The human ship hovered beside the ancient weapon, dwarfed by its size, but not by its presence. A transmission opened automatically. The woman's face appeared once more. Closer now. Clearer. Don't, she said. One word. Calm. Certain. The Arbiter's response came sharp. You leave us no alternative. You had alternatives, she replied. You chose not to take them. Energy within the Starkiller surged higher. Critical thresholds approaching. If you continue, the Arbiter said, we all burn. A pause. Then, not today, she answered. She turned slightly. Disable it. No visible attack followed. No beam. No pulse. Nothing. And yet, the Starkiller shut down. Instantly. Completely. Energy collapsed inward, stabilizing the star before detonation could occur. Every system within the weapon went dark. Not destroyed. Not damaged. Overridden. The chamber fell into stunned silence. That's impossible, someone whispered. The Arbiter stared at the display, something unfamiliar creeping into its voice. How? The woman looked back at it. You're not the only ones who study history, she said quietly. And in that moment, everything became clear. Humanity hadn't just prepared for war. They had prepared for every possible ending. The Council hadn't forced them into this. They had simply triggered something that was already waiting. And now, there was nothing left to stop it. The war didn't end with an explosion. It ended with silence. A silence so vast it stretched across systems, where fleets once moved, where weapons once charged, where fear once dictated every decision. Now nothing. The Galactic Council chamber remained intact, but it no longer felt like the center of power. It felt like a place awaiting judgment. The same platform where Elias Varon had stood now lay empty. Untouched. Unchanged. But no one could look at it the same way again. Around it the delegates gathered, those who remained. Their numbers hadn't been reduced by destruction, but by something far more unsettling. Irrelevance. Their fleets were gone. Not annihilated. Neutralized. Their networks severed. Their authority broken. For the first time in their existence, they were no longer in control of the galaxy. They were simply part of it. The Arbiter stood motionless, its once commanding presence now dimmed, not by damage but by realization. A signal appeared. Human origin. No one spoke. No one objected. Open it, the Arbiter said. The display shifted. A human figure appeared, not the commander from before, not a military presence. A civilian. No armor. No weapons. Just a person. That alone carried a message. We will begin, she said calmly. No introduction. No demand for attention. She already had it. You understand your position, she continued. It wasn't a question. The Arbiter inclined slightly. Acknowledged. The word echoed differently now. Stripped of superiority. Left with only truth. You initiated an unprovoked execution of a diplomatic envoy, the woman said. You classified an entire species as a threat without engagement. You attempted systemic extermination. Each statement landed with precision. No exaggeration. No emotion. Just record. You escalated to total system destruction when your control was challenged. A pause. You failed. The chamber remained silent. Because there was nothing to argue. No perspective that changed the outcome. No interpretation that softened it. Only fact. We could end this, she said. No emphasis. No threat. but every being present understood what she meant. They had seen it, felt it, watched their greatest weapons rendered meaningless, watched their strategies collapse before they could unfold. Humanity could end this. Right now. Completely. Instead, we won't. A subtle shift passed through the chamber. Not relief. Not yet. Something closer to disbelief. The woman continued. We are not here to replace you. Her gaze moved across the delegates. We are here because you cannot continue as you are. A projection appeared behind her. Data streams, records, histories of council decisions stretching back across millennia. Patterns emerged. Repeated actions. Species judged. Species erased. All justified. All controlled. All unquestioned. That ends now, she said. The arbiter spoke carefully. You intend to govern. No, she replied. We intend to hold accountable. A difference. A massive one. You will not dissolve, she continued. You will not be destroyed. Another pause. You will answer. The words settled deeper than any threat, because they implied something the council had never faced. Consequences. Not through force. Through judgment. You will stand before the species you have affected, she said. You will justify your decisions, and you will accept the outcome. A delegate shifted uneasily. You would subject us to lesser civilizations, it asked. The woman looked at it. After what you've done, she said quietly, there are no lesser civilizations. Silence followed. Heavy. Final. The arbiter processed the terms. Every path. Every outcome. There was no advantage to resistance. No hidden solution. Only one viable option remained. We accept, it said. The words echoed across the chamber. And with them, something ended. Not just the conflict. An era. Behind the human representative, the fleet came into view. Thousands of ships. Still, silent, waiting. Then one by one, their weapons powered down. Not as a gesture, as a decision, a deliberate act of restraint, the kind the council had once mistaken for weakness. We came to you in peace, the woman said. Her voice softened just slightly. You chose fear. A final pause. We chose to answer. The transmission ended. In the days that followed, the galaxy shifted. Not through conquest, not through destruction, but through exposure. Records were released, truths uncovered, histories re-examined. And at the center of it all, the place where it began, the council chamber. Above it in silent orbit, something new appeared. A structure, simple, unarmed, a memorials, visible from every angle. Every system, every species, a reminder that could not be ignored. Engraved across its surface in every known language, one message remained. We came in peace, and this time, the galaxy listened.